I have a copy of a book from 1934, the year it was published, that belonged to my husband's grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, which in a moment you can all have a look at.
Royal shockwave. Camilla has been stripped of every title after King Charles unlocked the Queen's secret codicil. Once the most powerful woman in the palace, she's now completely sidelined, her privileges and jewels reclaimed overnight. What did the Queen hide in her final days? How did this hidden document change the fate of the monarchy forever? Tonight, we reveal the explosive details that have left Buckingham Palace reeling and the world stunned. You won't believe what happened behind closed doors.
That foster a culture in which sexual assault is seen as normal and in which it shames the victim.
In the months after the death of Queen Elizabeth II, an undercurrent of unease had settled over the palace. People who worked within the household noticed it first, in the form of small, unexplained incidents. Pieces of jewellery would go missing for a day or two before reappearing in unusual places. Storerooms and private vaults seemed to have been accessed at odd hours. More worryingly, there were increasing reports of tension between senior staff members and a growing sense that someone within the inner circle was acting without oversight. Those tensions were whispered about in hushed conversations. Items moved in the night, archives left untidied, and an apparent shift in the behaviour of the Queen consort. Camilla's manner, people said, had become more assertive, even aggressive. These were rumours in the beginning, unverified and easy to dismiss, but as the weeks passed, the rumours began to coalesce into patterns that could no longer be ignored. King Charles, however, seemed determined to ignore the signs. He had always described his relationship with Camilla as one shaped by loyalty and deep attachment, the product of shared decades and complex personal history. To many observers, Charles's devotion over the years had seemed unquestionable. Even when criticism rose in the press or among royal watchers, Charles maintained a composed public posture. Privately, though, it appears he may have been less aware of the extent of the disquiet around him than those closest to the Queen's legacy. On the afternoon in question, Charles was alone in his study, a room filled with books, private papers, and artifacts that had belonged to his mother. It was an intimate space, not usually the setting for official business. That day, senior royal solicitors had been invited to review documents that had been loosely categorized as unclassified confidential papers belonging to the late Queen. These were personal writings and instructions that were kept separate from the official will and crown documents. The review was routine. It was meant to provide an updated inventory of material that had not yet been fully catalogued. What the solicitors found, buried within a stack of files, was something else entirely. In the course of their work, they came across a thick envelope sealed with red wax and imprinted with Queen Elizabeth's personal signet. This was not the sort of seal she used for ordinary matters. It was reserved only for documents of the highest confidentiality, materials she intended only to be opened under very specific conditions and at the right moment. The envelope had 3 words inscribed on the outside in black ink. The handwriting was unmistakably the Queen's, though shakier than usual, suggesting it had been written in her final days. Those 3 words were clear: for Charles only. When the document was carried to Charles's desk and placed before him, he felt a sudden chill, as if he had been confronted with something he was not prepared to see. His first reaction was confusion. Why had this not been included in the official reading of the will after the funeral? Why had it been hidden in a compartment of a vault that Camila was believed to have visited more than once in the weeks leading up to the funeral? And most urgent of all, why had it remained undiscovered until now? With great care, Charles broke the wax seal. A familiar scent rose from the old paper, a mixture of aged ink and the faint floral trace of the Queen's favourite perfume. It was as if she were present in the room, watching. He expected a personal letter, perhaps a final message from his mother. Instead, what he found was a legal document known as a codicil, a formal amendment to the official will, signed and finalised just 2 weeks before the Queen's death. A codicil carries the same legal authority as the will itself, and this one had language that was precise, direct, and without sentiment. It outlined a set of conditions regarding the preservation of personal legacies, diaries, and artifacts belonging to the Crown, particularly in circumstances where misappropriation or disrespect might occur. The opening lines made it clear that the Queen intended to protect the integrity of the Crown's personal history. It stated that any violation of the specified conditions, including unauthorized possession of listed items, would trigger an immediate review of the powers and titles associated with the consort. The wording was firm. The title of Queen Consort was described not as a permanent right, but as a privilege, subject to the strict adherence to the conditions laid out. Reading further, Charles reached the section that made his breath catch in his throat. It listed specific items, among them the Vladimir Emerald Suite, personal correspondence addressed to Catherine, Princess of Wales, and other pieces that held both historical and sentimental value. The document stated in unmistakable terms that if any of these items were possessed, displayed, or used without the express permission of the head of the House of Windsor, the violator, regardless of rank, would face the immediate stripping of all royal privileges. Charles let the paper fall back onto the desk, stunned. This was not simply a legal formality, it was a safeguard, a contingency plan the Queen had put in place to protect her legacy from any internal threat. And as he considered the implications, another, darker question began to form in his mind. If Camilla had already crossed these boundaries, what would this mean not only for her position, but also for the unity of the monarchy itself? Marks around the edge of the envelope suggested someone had previously tried to open it but failed, or perhaps had intentionally moved it to a place where it would remain hidden. The document's concealment raised even more questions. Has someone feared its contents? Or had someone wanted to prevent it ever being seen? Charles walked to the window, staring out at the grey landscape of Windsor Castle. He remembered seeing Camilla wearing an emerald brooch at a dinner just a week earlier. It had struck him then as a stylistic choice, but now it filled him with dread. His mind shifted from one troubling thought to the next. The betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It had moved into the realm of fact. For the first time in years, Charles did not feel like a king in full control of his household. What he held in his hand was more than a piece of parchment. It was a revelation that had the potential to alter his reign and the relationships at the heart of the House of Windsor. The silence in the study was thick, broken only by the rhythmic tapping of rain against the windows. Charles did not raise his voice. He did not shout or call for help. Instead, after a long moment, he pressed the button on his desk intercom and spoke in a low, steady tone. "Send for the Princess Royal, immediately." A new phase of this unfolding crisis had begun, and for Charles, the discovery of the Codicil marked a turning point from uncertainty to action. Princess Anne arrived at the study without hesitation, her presence calm but commanding. She had spent the months following Queen Elizabeth II's death in a state of quiet vigilance, observing the shifts within the palace and keeping a close eye on the family's inner workings. She understood the significance of the Codicil instantly, recognizing both the intent behind it and the potential consequences for anyone who had already crossed its boundaries. Charles did not need to explain. He simply slid the document across the desk toward her. Anne took it in her hands, examining the red wax seal, the careful handwriting, and the precise legal language of the Queen's final amendment. As she read, her expression remained composed, yet a faint trace of solemnity passed over her features. She did not express surprise, only the quiet acknowledgement of a situation she had long anticipated. She had warned Charles of possible breaches, but she had held back, perhaps hoping he would act before matters reached a crisis. "This was intended," she said softly, "to prevent anyone from exploiting the Crown's legacy. Mother foresaw the risks, Charles. She knew someone might overstep." Her words were measured but carried an unmistakable weight, the weight of experience and authority. Charles listened carefully, absorbing the reality that had been concealed from him until now. Anne began recounting her own observations over the past week, detailing events that had occurred within the vaults and private quarters of the royal household. Days earlier, she had conducted an unannounced inspection of the Queen's personal jewellery collection, a vault considered the most secure and historically significant repository of the monarchy's treasures. What she found was not a carefully maintained archive, as expected, but evidence of disorder. Several display cases were open, and key pieces of jewellery, items with both historic and symbolic importance, were missing. Among these were the Vladimir tiara and the Cambridge emeralds, jewels that had been explicitly designated for the next Princess of Wales. Anne explained that staff members had confirmed Camilla had ordered the jewels to be moved to her private suite. The reasoning provided to the staff was that, as Queen Consort, she had the right to wear and control these items. Anne's tone remained steady, yet the subtext was clear. The request had not been met with compliance because of administrative oversight or misunderstanding, but rather an intentional assertion of authority. The implications of this were significant. These jewels were not merely decorative, they were symbols of the monarchy's continuity and the Queen's personal legacy. Charles absorbed the information in silence, the enormity of the situation becoming clearer with every passing minute. Camilla had not only taken possession of items reserved for Catherine, but had done so openly, even during formal occasions. He remembered seeing her wear an emerald brooch during a private dinner, an incident that seemed inconsequential at the time but now took on a troubling significance. Camilla had not merely exercised poor judgment or indulged in personal vanity, she had disregarded explicit instructions from the late Queen. Anne continued, recounting a particularly confrontational exchange she had had with Camilla. When Anne attempted to intervene, reminding Camilla of the item's designated purpose, Camilla had reportedly laughed, dismissing the Queen's instructions. She had framed her possession of the jewels as a matter of entitlement, declaring that the old rules had ended with Queen Elizabeth. This statement, Anne emphasized, was not just arrogance. It represented a fundamental challenge to the principles and traditions of the monarchy. At this point, Charles rose from his chair, his face pale but resolute. The codicil in his hand symbolized more than authority. It was a tangible reminder of his mother's foresight and the legal mechanism she had left to protect the crown from internal mismanagement. The betrayal he now confronted was not hypothetical. Camilla had crossed a boundary that could no longer be ignored, and the consequences had been clearly delineated by the late Queen. Anne's next revelation shifted the focus from the jewels to correspondence intended for Catherine. In the period immediately following the funeral, a private letter from the late Queen meant as guidance and encouragement for Catherine had not reached its intended recipient. Evidence suggested that Camilla had intercepted this communication, hiding it in a drawer where it remained unseen. The implications were grave. By withholding the letter, Camilla had disrupted the transmission of guidance from one generation to the next, an act that, intentionally or not, threatened the stability of succession planning within the monarchy. This was more than a matter of familial misunderstanding. The letter contained explicit instructions and insights meant to prepare Catherine for her future role. Its concealment represented an attempt to alter the dynamics of influence within the palace, undermining Catherine's position while simultaneously consolidating Camilla's authority. Charles realized that this was no longer a dispute over personal property, it was a strategic maneuver with far-reaching consequences for the institution itself. The urgency of the situation prompted Charles to take immediate action. He placed a call to his son, Prince William, requesting his presence at Windsor. William arrived swiftly, not by traditional motorcade but by helicopter, signaling the seriousness of the matter. His expression was tense, his posture firm, a visible reflection of the gravity of the discussions that were about to unfold. It was clear that William had been informed by palace staff of the breaches, and he approached the situation with a combination of authority and determination. Upon entering the study, William did not offer formal pleasantries. His first words were measured, but carried an unmistakable edge. "You know why I'm here," he said. Charles handed him the codicil, and William examined the document carefully, absorbing the clauses related to both the jewels and the withheld correspondence. The significance of the codicil was immediately clear to him. It was a legal instrument designed to enforce the late Queen's intentions and protect the integrity of the Crown's heritage. William spoke directly, articulating the implications of Camilla's actions. He highlighted the theft of the emeralds and the suppression of the letter as deliberate attempts to undermine both Catherine's position and the broader stability of the monarchy. His words conveyed a combination of disappointment and resolve. Catherine, he emphasized, was the future custodian of key elements of the monarchy, and any interference with her role could not be tolerated. The dialogue between father and son was intense but necessary. William made it clear that compromises and delays were no longer acceptable. The codicil empowered Charles to take decisive action, and William expected that authority to be exercised. Charles, confronted with the legal framework and the undeniable evidence of breach, recognized the need for immediate, measured intervention. The next step involved a confrontation with Camilla herself. She was summoned to the library where Charles, William, and Anne had gathered. The setting was formal, yet private, a controlled environment designed to address the issue without unnecessary public exposure. Camilla entered the room, confident and composed, unaware of the full extent of what awaited her. Her initial demeanor reflected her expectation of routine discussion, perhaps even persuasion. She addressed Charles in a familiar tone, assuming the conversation would revolve around minor disputes or staff matters. She did not yet recognize the codicil or the intercepted letter as central elements of the confrontation. Her composure, however, began to shift as Charles and Anne methodically presented the evidence. First, Charles pointed to the recovered jewels, highlighting the explicit instructions in the codicil regarding their intended use and ownership. Then Anne addressed the intercepted correspondence, emphasizing the significance of the communication for Catherine's role in the monarchy. The impact on Camilla was immediate. Her attempts to deflect and rationalize her actions faltered as the legal and moral weight of the codicil became undeniable. Camilla's responses reflected a combination of disbelief, indignation, and calculated defiance. She argued that her actions were for the good of the monarchy, a claim that was systematically dismantled by the facts and the authority of the codicil. The document's language left no room for interpretation. The privileges associated with her position were conditional, and the breaches she had committed directly contravened those conditions. As the confrontation progressed, the dynamic in the room shifted. Charles, though emotionally affected, maintained a sense of authority and clarity. William's presence reinforced the seriousness of the situation, and Anne's unwavering focus ensured that the facts remained central to the discussion. The combination of legal authority, family unity, and historical precedent created an environment in which Camilla's position was no longer defensible. Ultimately, the codicil provided Charles with the legal foundation to enforce restrictions on the Queen Consort's privileges. This included the removal of certain items, the reassignment of responsibilities, and the implementation of safeguards to prevent further interference. The consequences were profound. Camilla's influence over both material assets and succession-related communications was curtailed, signaling a clear shift in the balance of authority within the royal household. The events of that afternoon at Windsor Castle underscored several key lessons. The first was the importance of foresight in governance, as exemplified by Queen Elizabeth II's Codicil. The document anticipated potential conflicts and provided mechanisms for their resolution, reflecting a deep understanding of both human behavior and institutional needs. The second lesson was the necessity of coordinated action among senior family members to enforce those mechanisms effectively. Without Anne and William's involvement, the codicil's directives might not have been executed with the precision required. Finally, the incident highlighted the vulnerabilities inherent in hierarchical institutions where personal relationships intersect with formal authority, illustrating how breaches of trust can have far-reaching consequences. By the conclusion of the meeting, the initial shock had been absorbed. Charles had moved from a state of disbelief to one of action, supported by William and Anne, who had provided both legal and practical guidance. The codicil was no longer a passive document. It had become an active tool to restore order and ensure the integrity of the monarchy. The jewels were returned to their designated vaults, correspondence was redirected appropriately, and the conditions outlined in the codicil were set to be enforced moving forward. This episode marked a turning point. While it did not resolve all challenges facing the monarchy, it established a precedent for how internal breaches of trust could be addressed without public scandal. The codicil's role was central, a carefully prepared legal instrument that bridged the gap between personal relationships and institutional accountability. Through its enforcement, Charles, Anne, and William signaled that while the monarchy remained a family institution, it was also governed by rules that could not be ignored. The days following the confrontation at Windsor were tense but necessary for re-establishing order within the royal household. Charles understood that the enforcement of the codicil was only the beginning. It was not merely about recovering jewels or intercepted correspondence. It was about asserting the principle that the late Queen's instructions could not be circumvented, even by those closest to the throne. The The challenge now was to implement these measures with precision, avoiding public exposure while ensuring that the message was clear internally. Charles convened a series of private meetings with his senior advisors, including palace officials who managed security, communications, and estate oversight. The discussions were meticulous, aimed at identifying both immediate vulnerabilities and long-term strategies to prevent recurrence. Every detail mattered, from the chain of custody of the Queen's personal effects to the formal channels through which sensitive communications would be routed. Charles emphasized that while discretion was crucial, accountability was equally important. The Codicil provided authority, but its enforcement required coordination and vigilance. One of the first measures implemented was the reassignment of oversight responsibilities for key assets, including the jewels and historical documents. Anne, whose knowledge of palace protocols and personal connection to the late Queen was unmatched, was appointed as the primary guardian for these items. Her role was not symbolic, it was operational. She conducted thorough audits of the vaults, cataloguing every item and confirming the presence of each piece that had been designated under the Codicil. Staff were instructed to report directly to her, and clear protocols were established for access, ensuring that no individual could unilaterally remove or relocate valuable items. This move reinforced both the practical and symbolic significance of the Queen's directives, emphasizing continuity and adherence to established traditions. Simultaneously, Charles focused on the issue of communication and the interception of correspondence. New procedures were introduced to guarantee that letters and directives intended for Catherine or other members of the royal family reached their intended recipients without interference. These measures included secure channels for delivery, verification of receipt, and documentation protocols that ensured transparency without compromising privacy. Charles was acutely aware that the credibility of the monarchy depended not only on visible actions, but also on the unseen processes that maintained trust and order. William played a critical role in reinforcing these measures. As the next in line for the throne, his involvement lent both authority and legitimacy. He worked closely with Charles and Anne to ensure that the Codicil's enforcement was consistent and impartial. His presence also sent a clear signal to the extended royal family and senior staff. Breaches of trust, whether motivated by personal interest or misunderstanding, would not be tolerated. William's approach was strategic, emphasizing collaboration and adherence to protocol while maintaining a firm stance on accountability. Camilla's reaction to the enforcement measures remained guarded but increasingly tense. While the initial confrontation had highlighted her defiance, the systematic implementation of the Codicil's provisions left her with limited room for maneuver. Security protocols restricted her access to specific areas of the palace, and staff were instructed to report any attempts to bypass these restrictions. The jewels were returned to their designated vaults, and the intercepted correspondence was delivered to Catherine under secure supervision. These actions, though discreet, conveyed a clear message. Authority and responsibility were non-negotiable, and the late Queen's intentions would be respected. Beyond the immediate enforcement, Charles and William recognized the need to manage the broader perception of the royal household. Maintaining discretion was essential to prevent public scandal, yet internal clarity was equally important. Advisors were tasked with ensuring that staff understood the chain of command and the importance of following established protocols. Training sessions were held to reinforce these principles, emphasizing the need for transparency and accountability in all matters relating to assets and communications. The aim was to create culture in which adherence to protocol became routine, reducing the potential for future conflicts or misunderstandings. At the same time, Charles and William remained mindful of the long-term implications for family dynamics. The enforcement of the Codicil inevitably created tension, particularly with Camilla, but it also offered an opportunity to clarify roles and responsibilities. Discussions were held regarding her formal duties as Queen Consort, with an emphasis on areas where she could contribute meaningfully without overstepping established boundaries. The goal was not to isolate or humiliate, but to ensure that each member of the royal family understood the limits of their authority in relation to the Crown's legacy. Catherine's position was central to these deliberations. She was briefed carefully on the Codicil's provisions and the measures being implemented to protect her role and the monarchy's heritage. Her awareness of the situation allowed her to act with confidence, understanding that her responsibilities were recognized and safeguarded by both her father-in-law and husband. The coordination between Charles, William, and Catherine reflected a strategic alignment that strengthened the monarchy's internal cohesion, ensuring that the Codicil's intent was respected across multiple generations. In parallel, the palace undertook a review of security and oversight procedures. The events surrounding the jewels and correspondence had revealed vulnerabilities that could not be ignored. Enhanced security measures were introduced, including updated inventory systems, restricted access protocols, and regular audits. These steps ensured that assets of historical and symbolic significance were protected against both inadvertent mishandling and deliberate interference. By addressing these vulnerabilities, Charles and his team reinforced the principle that the monarchy's legacy was both precious and non-negotiable. The Codicil also prompted reflection on the broader institutional structure of the royal household. Charles recognized that while legal authority was essential, it needed to be complemented by clear governance and procedural safeguards. Staff hierarchies, reporting structures, and decision-making processes were reviewed and refined. By aligning these mechanisms with the Codicil's provisions, the monarchy established a framework that could withstand future challenges, whether they arose from internal disagreements or external pressures. Throughout this period, Charles and William maintained a careful balance between firmness and diplomacy. The enforcement of the Codicil was inherently sensitive, touching on personal relationships as well as institutional authority. Their approach emphasized clarity and consistency, avoiding impulsive actions while ensuring that the rules were respected. By combining legal authority, operational oversight, and strategic communication, they created an environment in which compliance became both practical and expected. Camilla's adaptation to the new environment was gradual. Initially resistant, she began to acknowledge the limits of her influence within the boundaries established by the Codicil. Her public appearances and official duties were adjusted to reflect these limitations, while private access to assets and communications was closely monitored. While tension remained, the measures implemented by Charles, William, and Anne reduced the likelihood of further breaches, establishing a precedent for accountability that could not easily be ignored. By the end of this period, the palace had achieved a measure of stability. The Codicil's directives were fully implemented, staff were aligned with the new protocols, and the key assets and communications were secured. The family dynamics, though strained, had adjusted to the enforcement of authority, creating a clearer understanding of roles and responsibilities. The monarchy's continuity and integrity had been preserved, and the lessons of the initial breach had been translated into lasting structural improvements. This phase of enforcement demonstrated the importance of foresight, coordination, and strategic action within complex institutions. The Codicil, initially a legal safeguard, became an operational tool that guided decision-making, clarified authority, and reinforced accountability. Charles's leadership, supported by Anne and William, ensured that the monarchy could navigate internal challenges without compromising its legacy or public standing. At the same time, the experience highlighted the delicate balance required in managing personal relationships alongside institutional responsibilities, a challenge that would continue to shape the royal household in the years to come. The implementation of the Codicil ultimately underscored a fundamental principle. The monarchy, while rooted in tradition and family ties, operates within a framework of rules and responsibilities that must be respected to ensure stability and continuity. By acting decisively and strategically, Charles, William, and Anne reaffirmed the importance of these principles, demonstrating that authority and legacy are inseparable from vigilance and accountability. With the enforcement of the Codicil and the immediate recovery of the Queen's personal assets, the royal household entered a period of careful recalibration. The most pressing task was to ensure that Camilla's removal from active duties was implemented smoothly, without provoking public speculation or destabilizing the monarchy. Charles, alongside William and Anne, coordinated a strategy that emphasized continuity while minimizing disruption to public engagements and ceremonial obligations. The objective was clear: maintain the authority of the crown while preserving the dignity of all family members involved. Camilla's withdrawal from public duties was formalized through a statement issued early in the morning, crafted with meticulous attention to language. The statement framed her absence as a temporary retreat for health and personal reasons. The phrasing was deliberate. It avoided language that could be interpreted as scandalous, while signaling internally that she was effectively removed from the decision-making and public-facing aspects of her role. This approach allowed the royal household to manage both optics and operational control simultaneously. Staff and advisors were instructed to refer all inquiries to Lord Chamberlain, ensuring that communications remained consistent and aligned with the new framework. Inside the palace, Anne took charge of supervising the reorganization of Camilla's responsibilities and assets. She oversaw the retrieval of all items designated under the Codicil, including the Vladimir tiara, the Cambridge emeralds, and other historically significant jewellery. Each piece was carefully catalogued, verified, and returned to the appropriate vault. Staff were instructed to document each transfer, establishing a clear audit trail that reinforced accountability. This process was not merely administrative, it carried symbolic weight. By reclaiming these assets, the royal household demonstrated that adherence to the late Queen's directives was absolute and enforceable. In parallel, William assumed a central role in managing the operational continuity of the royal household. His focus was on delegating responsibilities previously handled by Camilla, ensuring that no gaps remained in public engagement, ceremonial duties, or charity work. Catherine, as Princess of Wales, stepped forward in an enhanced capacity, assuming roles that had previously been within Camilla's purview. These transitions were carefully timed to coincide with public events, reinforcing the perception of continuity and competence. In doing so, the monarchy maintained its public credibility while asserting the authority of the Codicil without overt confrontation. The implementation of these measures required coordination across multiple departments within the palace. Security protocols were updated to reflect Camilla's restricted access, and staff training emphasized compliance with the new operational guidelines. Communications teams were briefed on handling media inquiries and potential leaks, ensuring that the narrative remained controlled and consistent. By combining operational oversight with strategic messaging, the monarchy managed both the internal and external dimensions of the transition effectively. Charles's leadership during this period emphasized a balance between legal authority and familial sensitivity. While the Codicil provided a clear mandate, its enforcement inevitably impacted personal relationships. Charles, William, and Anne were aware of the potential for resentment or misunderstanding, and they approached the situation with a mix of firmness and discretion. Direct confrontation was avoided whenever possible, with structured protocols ensuring that Camilla's compliance was secured without unnecessary conflict. This approach reflected a broader understanding that the stability of the monarchy depended on both adherence to rules and careful management of interpersonal dynamics. The public narrative was managed with equal precision. Camilla's withdrawal from public duties was portrayed as a voluntary retreat rather than a punitive measure, emphasizing her need for health and personal focus. Scheduled events were reassigned to Catherine or other senior members of the royal household, maintaining continuity and demonstrating the institution's resilience. Media teams were instructed to highlight the ongoing charitable work and engagements of the royal family, subtly shifting attention away from the absence of the Queen consort. The careful orchestration of messaging ensured that the monarchy retained public support while reinforcing internal accountability. Meanwhile, the household staff adapted to new reporting lines and operational procedures. Responsibilities previously handled by Camilla's team were reassigned, and protocols were implemented to ensure that access to sensitive areas and assets was tightly controlled. Regular audits and oversight mechanisms were introduced, minimizing the risk of future breaches. These measures reflected a long-term commitment to safeguarding both the material and symbolic assets of the monarchy, reinforcing the principle that the Crown's legacy could not be compromised for personal gain. Charles also focused on repairing relationships affected by previous interference. The intercepted letters, including the one addressed to Catherine and the correspondence from Meghan, were delivered and reviewed under secure supervision. These actions were designed to restore trust and clarify lines of communication, reinforcing the idea that the monarchy operated on principles of transparency and respect for established processes. The careful handling of these communications also highlighted the broader significance of the Codicil, demonstrating that adherence to the late Queen's intentions extended beyond material possessions to encompass the continuity of influence and guidance within the royal family. Throughout this period, the dynamics between Charles, William, and Catherine became increasingly important. Their coordinated approach emphasized stability and shared responsibility, presenting a united front both internally and publicly. Charles's role as king was reinforced by William's support and Catherine's active engagement, ensuring that decisions were implemented effectively and in accordance with the Codicil's provisions. This alignment demonstrated the monarchy's capacity to adapt to internal challenges while maintaining the continuity and integrity of the institution. As weeks passed, Camilla's presence within the palace was minimized. Her public appearances were limited to controlled events, and her private access to assets and communications was strictly regulated. While she retained her personal allowance and certain privileges, her role as queen consort was effectively suspended. The arrangement allowed the monarchy to enforce accountability without resorting to public confrontation or sensationalism. It was a carefully calibrated balance between enforcement and discretion, reflecting an understanding of the importance of both authority and public perception. The strategic management of Camila's withdrawal also extended to ceremonial and public events. Her absence was incorporated into the planning of functions, engagements, and charitable activities, ensuring that the monarchy's public image remained coherent and dignified. Catherine, in particular, emerged as a central figure, stepping into roles and responsibilities previously associated with Camilla. This transition reinforced the succession framework and highlighted the importance of adherence to the late Queen's directives, both in terms of assets and the cultivation of future leadership within the royal family. The consolidation of authority also had broader implications for palace governance. Staff were reminded of the principles of loyalty, accountability, and adherence to protocol, and mechanisms were put in place to monitor compliance. These measures extended to security, communications, and operational oversight, creating a comprehensive framework for safeguarding the monarchy's legacy. By embedding these principles into daily operations, Charles and his team established a sustainable approach that could withstand future challenges, whether internal or external. One of the key outcomes of this period was the reaffirmation of the monarchy's resilience. The enforcement of the Codicil, the recovery of assets, and the structured management of Camilla's withdrawal demonstrated the institution's capacity to navigate complex internal conflicts while maintaining public credibility. The careful coordination between Charles, William, Catherine, and Anne reinforced the monarchy's continuity, emphasizing that adherence to established rules and responsibilities was essential for both stability and legitimacy. As the weeks progressed, the palace achieved a new equilibrium. The Codicil's directives were fully integrated into operational procedures, staff were aligned with the revised protocols, and the monarchy's public image remained coherent. Camilla's withdrawal from public life, while carefully managed, reinforced the principle that the Crown's legacy and the late Queen's intentions were paramount. The careful balance between enforcement, discretion, and strategic communication ensured that the monarchy could navigate internal challenges without compromising its authority or credibility. Ultimately, the resolution of this period highlighted the importance of foresight, leadership, and procedural clarity within complex institutions. The Codicil, while initially a legal safeguard, became a practical framework for managing both assets and family dynamics. Charles's decisive actions, supported by William and Anne, ensured that the monarchy could enforce accountability, protect its legacy, and maintain operational continuity. At the same time, the careful management of public perception preserved the monarchy's credibility, demonstrating that authority, prudence, and strategic planning were essential to the institution's long-term stability. By the conclusion of this phase, the House of Windsor had successfully navigated a potentially destabilizing challenge. The jewels, correspondence, and personal assets were secured, Camilla's role was formally restricted, and the operational and public functions of the monarchy continued without disruption. The Codicil had served its purpose, not only as a legal instrument but as a practical guide for governance, ensuring that the late Queen's intentions were respected and that the integrity of the institution was preserved. The family, while marked by tension and complexity, had adjusted to the enforced boundaries, creating a foundation for stability and continuity in the years ahead.